There is a certain stillness that lives behind the eyes of a man who has seen too much, felt too deeply, and made a quiet decision to stop explaining himself, not because he is broken, not because he is afraid, but because he has learned, through experience rather than theory, that true power does not announce its arrival. It settles, it observes, it waits. Look closely at a man's face, not the smile he offers on command, not the expressions rehearsed for approval, but the moments when his features return to neutral. That blank canvas, that unreadable calm. When the performance drops, the face becomes the most honest portrait of the soul. Most men are loud without realizing it, loud in their gestures, loud in their opinions, loud in their need to be understood and validated. They fill every silence because silence terrifies them. Silence feels like being ignored, and being ignored feels like weakness. But the man who has mastered himself understands something subtle and dangerous. Silence is not emptiness. Silence is compression. It is energy folded inward, potential held under control, and strength disciplined rather than displayed. You may have noticed this shift within yourself. You listen more than you speak. You watch rooms instead of trying to conquer them. You don't rush to prove your intelligence, your strength, or your value. You allow people to underestimate you because correcting them would cost time and reveal cards you have no reason to show. Your aura doesn't shout, it lingers. Your presence doesn't beg for attention, it bends it. There is a reason some men walk into a room and feel instantly familiar to those who live inwardly and deeply unsettling to those who live on noise. It's because they carry something invisible, a quiet gravity, a calm that cannot be rushed, provoked, or shaken. This is not dominance, this is not arrogance, this is not rebellion, this is composure. And composure, when cultivated deeply enough, becomes influence. You are not here because you crave labels or titles. You are here because something about this feels uncomfortably accurate, because you have spent years sensing that you operate on a different frequency in a world that rewards volume over depth. You have felt like a ghost in social spaces, present, observant, but not fully seen. And strangely, you've learned to prefer it that way. Because what you are building is not a performance designed for applause. It is a masterpiece shaped in silence, revealing itself only to those patient enough to notice. Now, let's dive deeper. Number 1, the silent threshold, recognizing the familiar feeling. If this feels familiar, it is not because you were searching for an identity, but because you crossed a threshold quietly, without ceremony, without witnesses, and without needing permission. There was no announcement, no applause, and no dramatic before and after moment the world could point to. One day, almost accidentally, you noticed that you no longer reacted the way you used to. Situations that once provoked urgency now pass through you like weather moving across a landscape. Conversations that once demanded explanation now feel optional, even unnecessary. You didn't become colder, you became clearer. This is often the first sign of elite self-mastery, a subtle withdrawal from unnecessary emotional labor. Most men confuse this with detachment or apathy, but it is something far more refined. It is discernment. You are no longer willing to spend energy where there is no return on growth, no alignment, and no depth. Your inner economy changes. Every thought, every reaction, every word is weighed, not out of fear, but out of respect for your own internal order. Your aura shifts here, subtly, not sharper, not louder, heavier, like gravity rather than force. You stop pushing and things begin to orbit. People may not know why they feel different around you, only that something has shifted, something unspoken, but undeniable. You begin to value inner order over external approval, coherence over validation, and silence over noise. The ghost phase begins here, not because you disappear from the world, but because you stop performing for it. Your face becomes neutral more often, your expressions are economized, and your presence is less reactive. The world is accustomed to men broadcasting themselves constantly, projecting opinions, emotions, and insecurities on every available surface. When that broadcast goes quiet, it unsettles people. They search for signals that no longer exist. This is not antisocial, this is selective presence. You are still engaged, but no longer entangled. You can be in a room without needing to dominate it, and in a conversation without needing to win it. This stage often feels lonely, not because you lack connection, but because shallow connections no longer register as nourishment. You begin to feel the difference between company and communion. You are learning to sit with silence without rushing to fill it, to let moments breathe and to let others reveal themselves without interruption. And that ability, quietly, is power. Number 2, composure under observation. The psychology of being unreadable. There's a moment in every self-mastered man's life where a quiet realization settles in. Being understood by everyone is neither possible nor desirable, and the moment this truth lands, composure stops being a personality trait and becomes a psychological advantage. Watch how truly composed individuals move through pressure, and you will notice patterns most people miss. Their eyes do not dart in search of validation, their posture does not collapse under tension, and their breathing remains slow even as circumstances tighten around them. This is not confidence theater or performative calm. It is nervous system regulation, the body trained to remain steady when chaos invites reaction. In cinema, characters like Thomas Shelby are often misread as symbols of brute dominance. But their real strength exists elsewhere, in their refusal to leak emotion prematurely, in their ability to stay sealed while others overextend. His eye contact is not aggressive, it is anchored. He is present without being exposed and aware without being reactive. Patrick Bateman, stripped of spectacle and sensationalism, becomes a darker lesson, a study in the danger of composure without moral integration. But even there, the stillness, the control, and the mask itself reveal something important. Emotional unreadability unsettles people more than overt aggression ever could. The lesson here is not imitation, but observation. Emotional discipline allows you to remain calm while others unknowingly reveal themselves. You listen longer than you speak. You pause before responding. These pauses are not hesitation or weakness. They are deliberation, not manipulative calculation, but reflective restraint. You allow meaning to surface before action and context before conclusion. This is why people project onto you. When you do not rush to fill silence, others rush to fill it for you, and in doing so they disclose their insecurities, their motives, and their urgency. Your shadow is no longer leaking into impulsive behavior. It is contained, integrated, and governed. You do not need to suppress it because you have mastered it. So this makes you difficult to provoke and impossible to rush. You are not moved by urgency that is not yours. You do not mistake noise for importance. And in a world addicted to immediacy, reaction, and constant emotional broadcasting, this level of composure becomes unmistakable. It is quiet power, slow power, power that does not announce itself, and that is precisely why it is felt the moment you enter the room. Number 3, stoic time, slowing the inner clock. Marcus Aurelius lived surrounded by war, illness, betrayal, and political pressure. Yet his writings reveal a man obsessed not with controlling the world, but with controlling his response to it. And this is precisely where the modern, misunderstood Sigma awakens, not through rebellion, but through realization, the realization that urgency is optional and that most pressure is borrowed, not real. Most men live inside other people's timelines, moving at speeds they did not choose, rushing because they feel watched, reacting because they feel evaluated, and speaking because silence feels like a loss of status. But you have stepped outside that clock. Your internal tempo slows even as external demands accelerate. You no longer mistake immediacy for importance. You stop answering immediately, not out of arrogance, but out of clarity. You stop explaining preemptively, because you understand that clarity does not require defense. You stop arguing with people who are committed to misunderstanding you, because you recognize that argument is often an emotional transaction with no return. This does not make you passive, it makes you precise. Precision requires time, and time requires restraint. Emotional resilience is built here, not through avoidance, but through measured exposure. You allow discomfort to exist without dramatizing it. You let anxiety surface without assigning it authority. You let thoughts arrive without obeying them. This is the discipline Marcus practiced in a world that demanded constant reaction, and it is the same discipline the Sigma embodies in a culture addicted to noise. Over time, this creates an internal silence that is not empty but structured, like a well-designed room where space itself has purpose. Nothing is cluttered, nothing is rushed. This is where the masterpiece takes form, not externally in reputation or applause, but internally in nervous system control and psychological economy. Each reaction you withhold strengthens your emotional circuitry. Each impulse you observe without acting refines your judgment. You become less readable, not because you hide, but because you are no longer leaking energy. People sense this. They may say you seem calm, detached, or unbothered, but what they are really sensing is that you are not living inside their emotional weather. You are not reacting to their storms. You are anchored, and anchors do not chase waves. They change tides without moving. Number 4, the ghost presence, influence without visibility. There's a phase where you realize something paradoxical. The less you try to be seen, the more your presence is felt. This is the ghost effect. It begins quietly, almost unnoticed by you at first. You stop announcing yourself. You stop over-explaining. You stop performing identity. You enter rooms without signaling importance, and yet the room subtly recalibrates. You leave conversations without dramatic closure, not out of coldness, but out of self-containment. You no longer need to extract acknowledgement to feel real. Your sense of self is no longer outsourced. What replaces the noise is density. Your presence becomes concentrated instead of dispersed. You are no longer fragmented by the urge to impress, justify, or maintain momentum. Your attention is focused, not scattered across reactions. And this focus creates gravity. People begin to notice when you are quiet, not because you are withholding, but because your silence is full. When you speak, it lands. Your words carry weight because they are not filler. They are not rehearsed for effect. They are rare, precise, and aligned. You stop narrating your intentions because you trust them. You act when action is necessary, and you remain still when movement would only be performative. This restraint unsettles those who rely on constant feedback loops, validation signals, and visible metrics of worth. They cannot read you, so they project. But for those who understand depth, your presence feels grounding, predictable in the right way, stable without being rigid. You are no longer chasing relevance, trends, or emotional reactions. You are embodying coherence. Your inner and outer states match, and that alignment broadcasts more than any display ever could. This is where sophisticated influence lives, not in persuasion but in stability, not in dominance but in consistency, not in visibility but in structural presence. You become someone others unconsciously adjust around, lower their volume near and sharpen their thoughts around without knowing why. You don't command attention. Attention reorganizes itself around you. And this influence costs you nothing because it is not effortful. It does not drain you. It does not require maintenance. It is not a performance you have to sustain. It is simply the byproduct of internal order made visible. This is the ghost effect, when you stop trying to matter and start being unmovable. Number 5, emotional architecture, building a nervous system that holds pressure. Self-mastery is not a mindset alone. It is physiology. It is the silent intelligence of your nervous system, the way your body learns what is safe, what is tolerable, what no longer requires panic or reaction. It is how you process stress before it becomes tension, disappointment before it becomes bitterness, uncertainty before it turns into anxiety. Most men try to think their way out of emotional turbulence. They argue with their feelings, suppress them, override them with logic. You take a different path. You regulate it somatically, through breath that slows instead of tightens, through pauses that lengthen instead of collapse, through learning how to feel fully without needing to escape the sensation. Emotional resilience is built here, not in motivation or affirmations, but in presence, staying with discomfort without rushing toward relief, letting the body complete its own cycle instead of interrupting it with distraction. This is the threshold where many turn away. They numb, they project, they seek validation, but you remain. You stay with the sensation until it naturally dissolves. Over time, this rewires your system. Your body learns that intensity is survivable, that pressure does not equal danger, that stillness is available even when circumstances are unstable. This is how trust is built internally. Setbacks stop feeling personal. They become information rather than identity. Failure becomes feedback rather than shame. You no longer narrate every experience as a story about your worth. You don't dramatize, catastrophize, or rehearse suffering. You extract lessons quietly, efficiently, without spectacle. This is why you recover faster. Not because you are unaffected, but because you refuse to amplify pain unnecessarily. You do not relive what has already passed. You metabolize it and move forward. Your shadow is acknowledged here. You do not deny your capacity for intensity, anger, ambition, or dominance. You recognize it clearly. But those energies are no longer chaotic. They are contained, refined, integrated. They do not leak into impulsive behavior or reactive decisions. They are channeled into discipline, patience, and precision. This is how a man becomes internally unshakable without becoming rigid, strength without brittleness, control without suppression, a system that bends without breaking, flexible strength, calm endurance. Number 6, quiet sovereignty, the man who governs himself. At the far end of this path, something subtle occurs, almost imperceptible to anyone who has not walked it themselves. You stop needing confirmation that you are on it. The restless checking fades. The quiet anxiety of asking whether you qualify dissolves. You no longer reach for labels to explain yourself. Sigma, stoic, independent. These words lose their gravity, their usefulness, and their hold. What remains is governance. Not control in the crude sense, but stewardship. You govern your attention with intention. You decide what deserves your focus and what does not. You govern your reactions, not by suppressing emotion, but by understanding it before it moves you. You govern your inner world with fairness rather than force, allowing thoughts to pass without letting them rule. Because of this, you do not dominate others. You have no need to. You are no longer dominated by impulses, by validation, or by the invisible tug-of-war of approval and rejection. Your aura stabilizes. It no longer spikes when praised or collapses when ignored. It becomes steady, quiet, and dependable. You are not perfect. And you know this without shame. You are coherent. Your values align with your actions. Your words match your silences. Your presence matches your intent. This coherence is rare in a world addicted to performance, and it is felt immediately, even if it is never named. You become someone who brings calm into rooms without trying. Conversations slow around you. Tension eases. Not because you demand attention, but because you do not need it. You become someone whose shadow is visible, but not threatening, acknowledged, but integrated, no longer leaking out in reckless ways. Your presence suggests depth rather than display, substance rather than spectacle. You move like a ghost, not because you vanish, but because you are not graspable, not reactive, and not easily provoked or predicted. You become a masterpiece not because you are finished, but because you are refined continuously, quietly, without announcement. Most men will never understand this path because it requires surrendering the theater of power in exchange for its reality. It requires letting go of noise, of dominance rituals, of borrowed identities. And if this feels familiar, unsettlingly familiar, it is because you were never meant to be loud. You were meant to be grounded.